In the beginning, there was the lithosphere, stone on a hot planet circling the sun. Then in time, life came and the biosphere grew, and life spread first in the oceans and then onto land and into the air. Now we're at a time where something new is developing. And I say new, but it goes back quite a ways, and we can actually debate how far back that is. Today, we're going to be talking about the noosphere or the Noosphere, depending on how you personally want to pronounce it. I've heard it pronounced both ways, and I can make arguments for both. The noosphere is the global mind that is being developed both through infrastructure and technology, and possibly on deeper levels than that. It's a fascinating idea, and we're going to talk about it today as we walk together down CreationsPaths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie, and I am a Christopagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan druid and sous chef to the Dogdo.
And today we're going to be talking about the Noosphere, primarily from sources like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. But we're going to be relying a lot on the work of the Human Energy Project and the many conferences they've done over the years as they've been probing this idea and developing it further. If you want more information, they have a wonderful channel on YouTube. You can just look up Human Energy and find it. They also have a website for further resources. So definitely check them out if this is something you're interested in. Brian Swim founded the Human Energy Project and has been integral to its development over the years. I'm fascinated every time they do a conference with all the new information that gets brought together. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We do 5 original Christopagan and Druid episodes Monday through Friday, and you don't want to miss a thing. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up, especially this week. All right, let's just get into it, shall we? So when I say something like the noosphere or the global brain, you're probably instantly thinking of something from a sci-fi movie, and wouldn't be wrong, but you also wouldn't be right. The idea of the noosphere covers everything from simple infrastructure, the way we do roads, the way we navigate the planes back and forth between cities, how we use the rivers for transit, to the way we are functioning on the internet, the way we are connecting with each other, the way information and ideas are spread, basically. Any means by which we humans are spreading technology, ideas, and information is all part of the noosphere. And what you'll notice very early on is that this is something that you've been thinking about probably for quite some time. Google releases its annual Zeitgeist report, which is their kind of look into what people have been talking about and searching online. That is kind of a bird's eye view of the noosphere and what's going on there. So one way to think about this is it's the way that we're not only communicating with each other, but the way that we are collectively creating both information and knowledge. It gives us common knowledge where there are names or cultural events that have happened, and whether or not you actively participated in whatever arena that name is from, you still know the name or things about that event. You picked it up in this kind of background radiation of thought and story.
So this would be like a sports ball figure, Peyton, really football. And
there are a lot of musicians that there are people that do not know anything about rap, but they know who Kendrick Lamar is, or they know who Drake is. There are people that know nothing about sports and can name various figures. I'm sure there's a lot of people that know nothing about Irish music, but know who Mokara is now. There are a lot of things that just go around in the zeitgeist and become this, again, background radiation, something that's in the group mind, something that is in the collective thoughts. A good example of this is when I hang out with my friends. I have never played a Pokemon game. I have never watched any of the Pokemon shows or movies, but I can still have a surface level conversation about Pokemon because it's so in the group mind. I can actually draw up in my mind what various creatures look like. I know the names of the characters from the TV show, primarily through memes and things like that. But there's so much conversation that I can have about a show and a game series that I have never interacted with. And that's because it's in the group mind. Now, the reason it's important for us to start thinking about this is we needed to have conversations about this, probably going back into the 90s and the early rise of the internet to try to figure out how we were going to handle these kinds of information technologies. But we didn't. And now the conversations are happening. They started in earnest really in the mid to late aughts and have gotten a lot more active in the teens. We're seeing the effect of this kind of thought radiation, this second brain that we have all offshored to the internet. This is something that did exist before through cable and satellite television. Newspapers were able to transmit knowledge this way. And we can see this going back all the way to the earliest days of symbolic thought. This is not something new to our species. It's just that ideas can spread a lot quicker and faster. Like we would the biosphere, we can start looking at and naming various aspects of it in ways that are helpful for us to understand what's going on. So we can talk about things that pollute the noosphere. We can talk about things that can clean up the noosphere. We can talk about the various strata and niches that exist within it. Like we would talk in the biosphere about predators and herbivores and carnivores and plants and trees and fungi. We can start finding ways to label all of the broader aspects of this shared space that we're all participating in so that we can figure out what we want to do about it, how we want to actually engage with it, and how we can have a broader discussion that's not exclusively platform specific. Because most of our conversations are just, what are we going to do about the Facebook problem or the Twitter problem or this particular platform problem? When what we're really talking about are things that are bigger than any one platform.
So is that where some of the helpful imagery, like thought contagions and stuff like that those kind of metaphors came in, where certain concepts can be thought of as a disease, as a plague, so that people can see them beyond just the platform that they may be most prevalent or infectious upon?
Yeah, and you can see how that just took over the language without people even realizing it when we talk about something going viral. It's something that was contagious and was able to move from person to person and actually spread and proliferate seemingly on its own. And we can see a lot of how these interactions happen. And what we're starting to learn is a new kind of literacy that's necessary beyond just simple media literacy. It combines our social aspects with our media aspects in ways we hadn't thought about before. For example, we can talk about misinformation and how fake news and other unreputable sources are spreading misinformation here, there, and yonder. And that's part of the problem. But the other problem is the social contagion of the various niches that people get involved in, the manosphere, the MGTOW movement, or any of the other groups that QAnon. It's not just the misinformation, but also the social pressures and peer pressures that cause shifts in personality and belief systems. And that's really what makes using the context of something like the noosphere helpful for us, because generally when you hear people trying to address these issues, they're just talking about how do we combat misinformation. We can combat misinformation all that we want, but if those peer pressure networks are still there, we did a good job for quite a while trying to mitigate the more extreme examples of white supremacy from our mainstream social discourse. Yet the peer pressures and peer groups were still around and able to spread that idea before it was able to build its own platforms and extend into the internet again. Suppression of an idea does not stop the social human to human transmission of ideas. And this is where we need to start thinking in new models, broader models, and deeper models of how we are structuring our thought. This is particularly important for people like us who are practicing various forms of religion and spirituality, because when you start understanding how much of our faith structures are just peer pressure from people in the 400s, 500s, and 1200s that have filtered down to us, and they're not something that's really expressly talked about. You just get it through osmosis, or you can see what needs to be weeded out better.
I was just thinking a good example of that would be in the Americas, where we have this huge rise and prevalent force, this fundamentalist force, this evangelical fundamentalism. It did not just start with a very sick fevered girl and bad preacher that created a Bible to put forward this idea, but it was also a secondary Bible that was plagiarized as a grift and sold at all these tent revivals that allowed this contagious idea to get into the noosphere in the States so heavily and so prevalent that then it fed itself and self-replicated heavily to where people believe that the whole rapture thing is just true because it's been around for enough generations.
Right.
Their grandfather's grandfather and their fathers all talked about it, so therefore it must have always been that way, when in reality, their grandfather's 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 grandfather didn't. It wasn't a concept back then.
Yeah, it's a very new idea, and it has both of these aspects that we're talking about. Most people don't know that it was plagiarized from a sick 15-year-old Scottish girl. And literally, she was feverish and suffering from delirium. I don't think we should take any of that seriously. By the way, the Passion of the Christ was based off of a book that was also written by a woman who was on her deathbed, feverish, and having visions in this deathly sick stage, and believed that her fever was divine prophecy. So this is a recurring problem in a lot of religious sources. It's not just the misinformation that leads people to believe that this is something eternal, but there's that peer pressure. But if you don't believe, then you're not one of us. And so it's the conjunction of those two where you can really see the power of this and how it is functioning in its own ecosystems and in its own self-healing and self-perpetuating way that makes it interesting for us to try to look at it and talk about it like we would talk about a forest or a desert or any other biome on Earth. Because we have to talk about not just the animals, right? The misinformation, if you will, right? The animals that are there, but how they interact with each other and how those interactions reinforce the cycles, right? It doesn't matter if you have wolves without deer. If the wolves aren't eating the deer, then there's nothing happening there. That predator-prey relationship comes into play in the wolves eating the deer. Learning to have that more biological eye on the way thoughts and ideas propagate is very helpful for us, because a long time ago, we became a very different kind of species. There are several different kinds of what are called replicators. And the basic replicator that everybody knows about is DNA. DNA wants to replicate, and that's what all of evolutionary science is studying, how DNA replicates itself. That's the whole survival of the fittest and mate selection and all of those things that you would learn about in biology class. Our species started taking control of that first replicator when we started developing ideas and technology, which are the other two replicators, that once they get going, take on a life of their own. Our species have small jaws because a long time ago, before we were Homo sapiens, we started cooking our food. We no longer needed large jaws so that large muscles could attach to them so that we could chew raw food. And so the very shape of our face changed, but not just the shape of our face. Being able to cook our food allowed us to get far more nutrients from the food, allowing our brains to grow and for us to have more energy that we could use on things like sitting around and thinking and telling stories and doing more abstract thought. It all feeds into itself. The problem is information develops on its own. It is its own replication system. We can talk about memetics and the way that memes work, because memes are the thought form version of a gene. But technology also has this quality to it that once you have a car, you'll have a lot of cars. Once you have a plane, you'll have a lot of planes. It's not just the idea of the car or the plane or the bicycle that is spreading. The idea takes on its own life, and the technology itself grows and develops and changes over time and becomes a replicant trying to perfect itself. And yes, we are involved in the process. It's not self-aware or anything like that. But these replication pressures are changing the way we interact with the environment, our own species, and ourselves. I'm old enough to remember before cell phones, and the cell phone changed all of the ways we interact with everything around.
Yeah. I was just thinking the other day, I was backing up into a parking space, and until this new car, I did it the old school way. I looked at the mirrors and stuff. The new car has a fancy camera in it, and I got so used to looking at the camera, I found myself the other day when backing up sunlight was hitting the camera, so I couldn't just use the camera. And I was blind, and I had to stop myself for a moment and recognize my entire understanding of how this process works had changed so much that just backing the car up using the regular mirrors and turning my head and looking was almost strange. It was a nice, profound moment for myself to see this in action and recognize.
And that's a really good example of how the Noosphere worked, because this technology creature, the camera on the car, ended up out competing the skill, which was how to turn, how to use the mirrors, how to do the other things, because it was quicker, easier, and better in a lot of ways, because it took away a lot of the blind spots. But this technological pressure changed a skill in you. So we're going from a technology to something in our minds that then changed a physical activity you take part in. Hopefully that helps you all see how this is all interconnected. It's just a small example. And we could go on forever about different ways that's interconnected, but it is a new level that has started moving so quickly that we need to be talking about how it is functioning, how we want it to function, and realize that a lot of it is out of our control. For everyone out there who does not like generative AI, the genie's out of the bottle. There's no putting it back in.
It's out there. Once again, think of this in terms of ecosystems. It's already out in the ecosystem. For those that do not adapt, this is a basic evolution. Those that refuse to adapt will be left behind.
That's the question. How do you deal with an invasive species like that? At what point does it become just an endemic species? And you just have to accept that it's here. There are a lot of plants that we look out our windows every day and we assume are just part of the environment because they've always been there and they were always there for our parents and our grandparents, but they didn't arrive here until Europeans did. We brought them with us and we planted them.
It's like the heavy pollen count right now. We're suffering from allergies. We've been suffering from allergies ever since spring started here in the Northern Hemisphere. And a lot of that heavy pollen was because of how back in the 1800s, how city planners decided the fruit-bearing trees were a nuisance and put a whole bunch of the pollinating trees in, and now we have to live with it.
And also there was selective pressures put on various other kinds of trees that just produce more pollen. We're allowed to proliferate better. I remember when I was a kid, you go walk through the woods around here and they would be filled with poplars and oaks and maples. And I don't see as much of the diversity as I used to see. You could take a very short walk and see a whole bunch of different kinds of oak trees. I remember when I was a kid, we had to collect leaves and name the different kinds of trees. I still have this memory of all the different kinds of trees we used to find. There's at least one kind of poplar tree that I used to be able to find around one of my grandparents' homes. I can't find a single one of them around it now. Yeah. And there were a lot of reasons for that. These are the changes that we have made when we're looking at it through the lens of not just the internet. And that's important to remember here. A lot of people want to wall off these discussions to just, oh, isn't the internet awful? Maybe the internet was a bad idea. I hear people say that. This is not an internet problem. All of these problems existed when there were nothing but mailers that went out to people's houses as newsletters and cable television.
Yes, door-to-door people that dropped off pamphlets.
All of these problems existed back then. They just weren't able to accelerate as quickly because the technology necessitated slow motion. It took time for things to travel through the mail to get to people's homes. All of the phenomena that we're seeing now, most of them are not new. They existed before, but were constrained by the speed at which the ideas can spread.
So I was thinking, because we're so big on practice and engaging in practice here, that I would like to invite everyone throughout this next week to just take a moment to notice when you're having that sense of being part of a larger thinking web, when you're having moments, either conversations with friends and family or online or out in the community, just journal it. Like Charlie Happy used a journaling word there, but just journal, just take notice of it. I think the first step in being aware of this and learning what this noosphere is just observing it, just seeing it and being able to recognize it. I think engaging in that practice would be so beneficial for everyone because it helps so much. Once you can start to see it, you see it everywhere.
And yeah, learning to see it is tricky sometimes because you don't realize when we're seeing it. When you go to do laundry and you pick up a particular brand of laundry detergent, you are interacting with the noosphere. Various commercials or other forms of marketing, consciously or unconsciously, got you to either buy that yourself or position it in whatever store you bought it from.
It's why in the States, when you get a boo-boo and you go for a Band-Aid and not a plaster, because that's a brand name. We just use colloquially, we don't even have as much of the brand association anymore. I still call them Band-Aids, and I use all different kinds of brands. I'm not brand loyal. I still call them Band-Aid because of the Noosphere.
But a lot of the things that we interact with are part of those thought webs, and you should see them as small as the shampoo you use you got it because of some process of the noosphere, some process of marketing or the like, that if nothing else got it where your hand would pick it up in the store or put it in front of you online, or enough commercials in front of you that when you saw it, you thought to yourself, I should buy that brand. That is all interaction with the noosphere that we go through every day. What are you having for lunch today? What are you having for dinner tonight? What did you see or interact with that may have put the ideas in your head to coax you into having that particular food? Did you watch a movie where they were having that and not even thinking about it, decided I'm going to have that for dinner this week? Or maybe consciously decided I'm going to have that for dinner this week. There are a lot of ways that we interact. And when you start noticing it, it can feel overwhelming. A lot of people, when they first go through this process, start thinking everything's outside of my control now and everything's just being determined for me. That's not entirely true, but the first step to getting control over how these brands and ideas are affecting you is to notice them.
Yeah. One of the things, when somebody gets overwhelmed like that, I like to sit them down and go, okay, yes, you're being aware of an ecosystem. When it gets really cold out, you don't just sit there and freeze. You go inside, you put on a jacket, you get warm. You turn on the furnace or you light the fire and you warm up. It's that same thing. Being aware of weather as an ecosystem can be intimidating at first, but we still can have effects on our environment. And that awareness is beneficial because you can see how you're impacting your ecosystem.
Yeah.
And how you are either contributing or things that you think are beneficial. You can then see how it's harming the noosphere, where you're spreading bad plague ideas.
And it all starts with noticing. I hope that this has opened your eyes. I hope that you've started to see this for the first time, or maybe in a deeper way. We haven't even covered the basics about the noosphere. There's so much we could go into. We haven't started talking about the omega point and how emergence works. Eventually we will get to all that. I am very excited to say that we are starting a new project over at fractalkinship.com, where we're going to be building up a knowledge base that will help you start to get your footing in all of this. And hopefully it'll help you out. Now, all of this week is not going to be dedicated specifically to the noosphere, but you will notice that it has a very strong resonance with it and is taking us down the rabbit hole to how these ideas really do affect our day-to-day lives and how we can use it to help ourselves. As usual, you can always follow us on our regular accounts. If you have some time, you might want to bookmark fractalkinship.com. There's going to be some interesting stuff going up over there, and we'll be digging into that deeper in the future.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they don't notify us, so we won't know. But you can leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a message there, and we will see it, and we will be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars, you can pass our way. We offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can support us using the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. We are ever so grateful. Thank you so much. You all really do help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, please share it with others. That helps us out more than you know.
Oh, blessed Salvatrix Monday. Bless us with your wisdom that we might find our way through and be enlightened to know all that we can. Help us to see the ways that we can bring grace and peace to this weary and hurting world, and help us always to live in peace, justice, and hope. Amen.
Amen.